You are listening to the Casting Shadows podcast. This episode will primarily be call-ins. It's been a very long time since the last episode. Some of that has been because of work and family life. Some of that has been because of Spotify. And some of that has just been, cosmic rays. And so a couple of call-ins have managed to accrue, and it's time to share them and interact with them. Our first caller is Jason Connerly of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Now, if you, like me, are a regular listener of the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, then you, like me, will have been saddened to hear Jason's message that he is, at least temporarily, stepping away from the regular production of that highly valued central clearinghouse of podcasts. Fun to listen to, informative, and true to its title, a wide variety of different things for us to listen to. But like many of these endeavors, the joy that we get as passive listeners can be very draining on the people who produce them, especially if they are juggling a lot of time and obligations and pressures in other parts of their lives. And then double that by Spotify kind of pulling the rug out from under the guerrilla podcasting community. So while it is with heavy heart that we hopefully only temporarily say goodbye to the Nerds RPG Variety Cast, it is with a light heart that we can receive this and other call-ins on other shows from Jason. Take it away, Jason.
Hey, Anthony, Jason here. Just calling in on imagination and preparation with my homework. I am in the car listening, lots of road noise, but since you didn't mention you're in the car, and since I've seen you on Zoom calls before, I'm assuming that you're in your kitchen or living room where you normally record, that I've seen you before, and recording there. Because, like I say, you didn't say you were in the car. So that's probably cheating on my part. As far as the other homework assignment with the staircase, I imagine the staircase from 1931's Dracula. You know, the one we see there at the end of the film, the iconic one, where, does Dwight Fry get thrown down that staircase? I forget. Somebody gets thrown down the staircase there at the end. But that staircase there. And then for my companion, I'm imagining there's a character, I don't remember if it's cleric or fighter. I think it's a cleric, because I think they're doing a detect traps or something spell in the image I'm thinking of. But they dress like Crusader, and they have round helm with just a nasal piece there, and maybe a shield on their back. But that character I see sitting there on the stairs. So there you go.
Thanks for playing along, Jason. I really appreciate it. I was in the car, it turns out, but where I really wasn't that important. What people imagined and how they imagined it was important. So what I get from your message is that the key detail that leapt to mind for you was where I was and what that looked like. It's something that you have seen before when we've had Zoom calls together, such as for Cerebrivore and other things. So I find that interesting, and all by itself is worth the value of the call, but you played along harder, and you went with the assignment at the end. I love that staircase in that version of Dracula, and your memory doesn't fail you. It is Dwight Fry's Renfield, who's pleading for his life. I didn't lead them here, master. I didn't betray you. Who winds up being reminded how gravity works and getting to count each stair on the way down. Yes, strong visual imagery, like before. And again, drawn from memory, this time memory of a film rather than memory of a conversation that we've had in the past. I find that interesting. You have seen, at this point in your life, billions of films, different staircases and different settings to draw from. You drew a very interesting one, and one that we got to see from a variety of angles, like looking up the stairs and looking at the stairs from the side and looking up at the rising staircase from the bottom and things like that. So it's a very interesting selection. And that is a black and white image to which you applied, altering it now using imagination to alter the memory of the black and white film, this character, shield on their back, the type of helm that they're wearing, that they're sitting on the stairs, their occupation, perhaps the look on their face because you described them as concentrating and working a spell. I find all this really interesting and suggestive of a rich, imaginative life that you still managed to give us the key points of in just a 90-second call. How cool is that?
I'll show you the life of the mind!
Our next call-in is from Spencer of Keep Off the Borderlands, now home to Movie Night, where once a month, on the last Monday of the month, we will hear call-ins about the month's movie, what we thought about it, what we loved about it, what we hated about it, when and where we saw it, and how it has contributed to our gaming. So if that appeals to you either as a participant or as a member of the audience, check out Keep Off the Borderland. But Spencer was kind enough, like Jason before him, to call in with his thoughts on the Imagination and Preparation episode with some imaginings. So, Spencer, what can you tell us?
Hey Anthony, Spencer here. I thought I would give you a response to the little visualization exercise you suggested. And, well, first of all, I'd like to point out that it's quite some time since I listened to the episode, but I've still got quite a vivid image in mind, which I believe what I'm picturing now is what I pictured at the time. So I'm going to describe what I'm picturing now. I'm certain there's going to be details here that you never described. So as I recall, you were talking about a ruined castle, and we're looking at a companion sitting on a broken stairway. Now, what I'm imagining is the interior of a tower and these steps, stone steps, going up the interior wall of the tower, if that makes sense. I'm looking up and there is blue sky above me. We're effectively outside because it's a ruin. The steps stop at a certain point, maybe not because they're broken, but because the floor of the level they're leading to is no longer present, probably because it was made of wood and has rotted or burned away or whatever. For some reason, the steps stop part way up this wall, and the wall I'm imagining is the interior of a circular tower. I'm picturing my companion sitting atop these stairs, these stone steps, and they are, well, I'm getting whittling and whistling. So, and I'm imagining that they're swinging their legs off the edge of these steps and whittling away a little piece of wood. and whistling a tune while they're doing it. I'm picturing them dressed in green. I'm picturing someone like an elf, but a dark-haired elf. So, I'm getting all these embellishments. I'm imagining there's a lot of moss and vines growing all up this stone wall and around the steps. Maybe there's a coolness to the air kind of coming off the stone. What is interesting is that I'm not getting any smells or anything like that. I can think about what kind of smells there might be, but it seems a lot more difficult for me to conjure up those smells. I could describe them, but I'm not actually sensing them. I'll be very interested to hear what other people imagined. Also, while I'm here, I'll tell you what I pictured when I was listening to the podcast at the beginning. And I imagined a room that I believe I've probably been in before. Quite a small office, modestly decorated, basically quite neutrally decorated. I'm imagining you sitting at a desk with a computer in front of you. I'm imagining you wearing perhaps a white shirt under a navy blue sweater for some reason. I realise I've got no details for what you're wearing below the waist, which is interesting, as I'm constructing this picture, obviously, from what I've seen in your YouTube videos. I'm looking at your left side as if I'm standing in the doorway, and beyond you a window, and I can see out of that window fields, basically. I'm imagining quite a flat landscape, possibly some hills far off in the distance. And also I could hear cars passing, but I'm not seeing the cars. I'm imagining there's a road going past the window, but you're back from the road slightly, and you're probably not on the ground floor. You're on the second level of the building, perhaps, because I'm not seeing those cars. I'm just seeing the landscape beyond the road that I'm imagining there. So I don't know if that is of any interest whatsoever, but there you go.
Thank you so much for taking the time to record that and send it to me directly through Discord, Spencer. I really appreciate the insight into the strength of your imagination, and not just a one-note imagination such as purely visual or contextual, but with a variety of senses and details included. I really appreciated your thoughts on the experience as well. I think our memory of the things that we imagine, if we develop the habit, let's say, of treating our imaginations with some respect, they can take on the same vibrancy and intensity of real memories, or that's not the right way to say it, memories of real events rather than imagined events, because after all, they are real memories. But what I particularly enjoyed about what you shared is how the contextual information of where we are viewing it from and what the experience will be like for the character informs the other imagery. It pointed out things to you that were conspicuously absent, such as sensations, right? I'm in a ruined castle. It should be cool or cold here, but I'm not really remembering any sense of that. I thought that detail was particularly interesting and important. And how do we get to a place where those sensations might be added in? Would they have a false feel because we're thinking, oh, I should also remember it's cold, just existing on more of a conceptual level? Or over time, does that become a detail we can imagine? That's something to think about. I think it's kind of cool. But this call was not the only call that I got from Spencer. Before this call, after my conversation with the host of the @TableRunner YouTube channel, Chris, who goes by the nickname Crispy, Spencer gave his thoughts on VTTs and their effect on play. So let's go to that call too.
Hey Anthony, Spencer here. I know you already have an extended message from me and plenty of other calls to be getting on with, but I really enjoyed your conversation with Crispy, and it got me thinking about my experience with VTTs. I do all my playing online, but I play a lot of Theatre of the Mind. We do use Roll20 when playing Call of Cthulhu, but that's mainly for images, handouts, that kind of stuff. When I think back to the events of those and other Theatre of the Mind sessions, I conjure up quite vivid images of the events, particular moments of play, and feel that the act of doing that, the process of recollection, kind of reinforces that sense of immersion after the fact. In contrast, when I think back to games that have utilised maps and tokens, those gamist elements of a more strategic style of play, the initial images I get are of the VTT. Now, I can get to a more immersive level with my recollection of playing those games, but there's a sense of it requiring a certain degree of effort to do that, to get down to that character level of the experience, having to dig a little. Memory being what it is, reconstruction, a fabrication, I'm not sure how much it can say about what I was genuinely experiencing in those sessions at the time of play, but I thought it was interesting, to me at least. Take care.
Interesting to me too. And we can see how these two calls, separated in not in space for Spencer, but in time for him and for me, we can see how they relate to each other, how the building blocks of imagination are as much memory as fantasy or things that we create out of nothing. Take, for example, his description of how he imagined me, as I asked people to do the visualization exercise, based on the audio at the beginning of the episode, where do you imagine I am? And we have Jason's response to where his imagination and his memories combine to take him for an answer to that question. And we have Spencer's, right? We have some details from Spencer's. He had more time to talk about colors and clothing. And as he points out, these are likely drawn from clips he's seen of me on YouTube or the conversations that we've had on Zoom, again, doing Cerebrivore episodes. So it's kind of interesting, Now, he twigged on something that made me smile, a navy blue sweater. Now, I don't happen to own a navy blue sweater. I do own one piece of navy blue clothing, mostly to make my wife relax a little bit about everything else being black, or almost everything else being black. So, and I have indeed worn a navy blue shirt in one YouTube episode. Did this creep in through Spencer's memory, through his subconscious? Did it creep in unbidden and inform his imagination of me? Or did this come in from personal experience, personal preference? Did it come purely unbidden as an act of creation? It's interesting to think about. May not have, or may not seem to have, immediate practical relevance to the play, but then again, the more we feel comfortable and confident with sitting down to imagine and having that be a significant part of our play that we can draw from and remember afterward vibrantly as an experience of being, imaginatively speaking, someone else, somewhere else, doing something unlikely for us to do, I do think it has a certain amount of value. So thank you very much for taking the time to give us these calls. Spencer, remember, Keep Off the Borderlands is still on the air, and this month's movie call-in opportunity is for The Dark Crystal. The next series of call-ins dates back to the same period of time, around the time of the release of my last episode, and is on a related topic but separate from the imagination series as it exists here on the podcast. The caller is SameOldJi, which people that know Casting Shadows and me from YouTube will instantly recognize, as we've had many, many enjoyable conversations here on YouTube. SameOldJi has recently launched a podcast, and he has hit his 12th episode, if I'm remembering correctly. Now, at the time he made these calls, he and I were scheduled to have a conversation on his podcast, and we did. And some of the material that he brings up here in these calls are what we ended up talking about there on that podcast. So there'll be a link to that episode where he and I talk about this stuff in the show notes. But I play this series of calls in their totality because I'm curious what you do. I'm curious what you think, what your reactions are, what way to talk about the actions in a game is important to you. Now, system matters, setting matters, the method of communicating with each other, whether you're face-to-face at a table or logging on to use a VTT or just doing a Zoom call or whatever, all of these things matter. And how does your communication and conversation change with the content that you're playing with, the medium that you're using to play, and the people that you've chosen to play with? I put this question out there for you to consider. And if you're particularly bold, or at least community-minded, call in and share your thoughts.
Hey, Anthony. It's SameOldJi. I just have been listening to your conversation with Brian Gregory about improv and prep. And there is some very cool ideas there. And it's too bad it's 90 seconds over here. But I will try to make it as sharp and short as possible. So I really liked the example of the fire stick, the poker thing that you use to move the log, in a fire pit or something like that. And it, this is one of the topics that I've been discussing a lot on my channel and on my podcast as well. Is the idea that we should not necessarily ask questions, or at least ask permissions. Ask permission to narrate ideas and stuff about the environment and the world. This is part 2. This is my second message. So it is very interesting the way I was listening to you guys talking, and I was like, this is modern AI. This is exactly Brian Gregory, said something like that. He said, I walk toward the foyer or the fire pit. Do I see, a fire stick? Do I see the fire thing that, to poke the log? He's asking permission. This is exactly what it is. And so this is Mother May I, and this is a game stopper. This is a waste of time and energy, because since he's asking the permission to the GM, then the GM has to say yes or no, and it cuts the flow of things, the flow of events. So and it becomes a habit, and when it becomes a habit, the whole session becomes a lot of permission asking. This is the third message. So yes, and so it becomes it quickly. If let's say you're four people, and they all have that habits, narrative habits of, do I see this? Do I see that? Can I do this? Can I do that? It's gonna be some kind of a dialogue about, and it's always like the idea of saying yes or saying no, right? So you guys talked about it very well. And then, so after he gave that example, you came back with a very interesting idea and I was thinking exactly the same thing when I was listening. I was like, you can say no, even I'm not an advocate of saying no, but you can do it in a very nice way, actually. So let's say you have like a Mother May I kind of guy. Or let's say you have a no. Let's say you have a super improv player that creates his own stuff in the world. All right, so he's going in and he says, "I'm going to the fire pit, and I grab, the fire stick." And so he has a little bit of premature, narration in Runeslingers in your book, Anthony, actually. Okay, so this is the fourth message, and so you go. Yeah, and the player's doing a little bit of premature narration by saying that he's grabbing, the fire stick. And you had this really cool idea that as a GM, all you have to do, if this happens, if you don't want to say yes or no and cut the game and take the rug under the player feet, what you do is you say exactly like you did. I was amazed. Like, we are thinking the same thing. You said, as you put your hand to grab the fire stick, it's gone. It's not there. It's supposed to be there, but it's not there. Or, this is a very nice way to say no to someone who's being premature and creating stuff out of his head, and let's say the GM has a preparation about that, or even, let's say he doesn't have a preparation about that. He just want to, create adversary situation for the player. And so, no matter if you let the player grab the stick or not, this is the last message. It's very interesting technique to go around, that idea, because and in that way the player doesn't have to ask question like, do I see a fire stick, when it's obvious that there is one. So, or not, but if it's not, let it flow into narration. So go ahead and grab the stick, or, there's another way you can ask, if you don't want to be aggressive and premature. What you can do is you can go, like you guys did, it was amazing. It's like you go and you say, I walk toward the fire pit to get the fire stick. And then you can let the player know that there's none. So the player is proactive, creates things in the world, doesn't wait, doesn't ask permission either, just by the way you phrased it. So you can go a long way, by working on your narrative skills in this hobby, to not have to ask permission all the time. And so this is the last message for real. So that was very amazing. This conversation, this dialogue you guys have, because so big shout out to Brian Gregory and you for those great this great dialogue. And I'm only halfway through it now. Like I'm in an hour in, so I have another hour and 18 minutes to watch it. So I'm probably gonna have to send more message actually. Sorry in advance. But yes, it's very cool. And there was another technique that came up a little later in the conversation, coming from Brian Gregory, that was amazing as well. So concerning the flow of things, to talk in an affirmative, never describe the world, but always describe what you do. It's a very interesting principle. I'm going to have to think more about it. So yes, thank you very much. Those are a great conversation. And I might going to send more message.
Thanks very much for taking the time to send those messages, Jean-Francois. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate the invitation to your show. And I'll put a link to the episode where we had a conversation in response to this and other things in the show notes so people can find out how we interacted about these ideas that you've discussed here. So no spoilers. But what I will say is that after that episode and talking about the different games that we were both playing and interested in, he's just released a few episodes about his exploration of old school essentials, and we've been talking about his simultaneous exploration of Blades in the Dark and my return to getting to play Call of Cthulhu the way that I always used to play Call of Cthulhu. And he has joined in. He's going to play Call of Cthulhu with us, and we've already had, at time of recording, our first session, applying the principles that we've discussed and in the past and here in this episode and beyond. The Call of Cthulhu campaign that I'm talking about is called Turn of a New Leaf. You can find it on my channel in YouTube. There are 4 distinct branches of play within the Turn of a New Leaf campaign. We have the initial one, which started with Ivan Mike 1968 of the YouTube channel of the same name, and Joe Richter and Brian Courtmarsh. These guys began to explore Boston in November of 1931. The next branch of the investigation featured Prohibition Bureau agent Alex Thornton, as he began to track down some strange activity in Boston in November of 1931. The next one, the third branch, which has been recorded but not yet released, although it's on the cusp of release at time of recording. It may actually be out by the time you listen to this. It features Craig Shipman of the Third Floor Wars media empire. And he explores in a rather painful fashion a fall from high society into the underworld of Boston in November of 1931. And finally, SameOldJi, whose episode might come out before Craig's or might come out just after Craig's, I haven't quite decided, is, you guessed it, set in Boston in November of 1931. The setting is being conducted like a sandbox. The characters are largely unaware of each other, but at any given moment they might intersect with each other. And we have arrangements to try and get together and play together should that eventuality take place. They are within days of each other in time. Their paths have crossed. They have stood in similar places. They have talked to similar people. They are investigating the same thing. They're not sure, and I'm not saying. All right, that brings this episode to a close, and it's a short one, running just barely over 30 minutes. Future plans for future episodes are this. There will be a kind of a recap and reflections or analysis of the Call of Cthulhu campaign once more of the branches come close to a point of resolution. Now, we're not using a traditional structure of playing separate and discrete investigations. We have an ongoing kind of fluid timeline. But when we reach a point in play that feels like something has been resolved, we pause there and we do character experience and that sort of thing. So as more of these branches, these 4 independent branches, reach a comparable resolution point, I'm going to do a recap and a reflection on play, how it's been done, what it's meant, and that sort of thing. So that will be an episode in the future. Not yet recorded. We're not yet ready. But one that's already recorded, already ready, and set to be released for later this week is an interview I did way back in January with Che Webster of Roleplay Rescue. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, with Jason announcing that he's at least taking some time away from podcasting, Che Webster has also indicated that the regular schedule of releasing episodes is likely at an end. If you've been following Roleplay Rescue, I know you've noticed. So, my conversation with Che is a pretty important one for me to get out there, and it ties in so nicely with the ongoing focus on imagination and preparation with action, reaction, and interaction. So I hope you'll come back and listen to that, because I think it's a really good conversation. That episode runs an hour. Anyway, until the next time, you've been listening to the Casting Shadows podcast. You can find us here. You can find us on YouTube doing videos and releasing this podcast. And, of course, where it all started, at the Casting Shadows blog at castingshadowsblog.com. Take care.